Today, we are going to talk about tic disorders, ADHD, sensory processing disorder, OCD, anxiety, and the laundry list of symptoms that most of our children have. And we are going to talk about that connection. What is that connection between all of those diagnoses? We're going to dig in. So, we are always on the lookout for how do we stop ticks? How do we, we're Googling tick disorder treatments, but we don't take into account all of the other diagnoses that might be connected to our children's tick disorder. I mean, I can tell you that my son had what I call a laundry list of symptoms. Not only did we have a tick disorder, we had sensory processing, we had dysgraphia, I would have called it ADHD. We never went for that diagnosis because I was done at that point, but definitely the lack of focus. We had cyclical vomiting. We had wild mood swings like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type of mood swings. I mean, we just had this laundry list of symptoms. And so I never associated the fact that they all went together. And I want to talk about that connection with you today. So, children who suffer from tic disorders, ADHD, OCD, and sensory processing are more likely to have other diagnoses. Tic disorders and other diagnoses are definitely related. They often go hand in hand. And when we're looking at co-diagnoses, I want to point out that these are when your child may have two diagnoses that go together. And here's kind of a staggering statistic that's out there, and that is 1 in 10 people has a chronic illness. 4 out of 10 people have more than one chronic illness. So when we're looking at these things, these are chronic, they're long term. It's not like the flu or the Rona or anything else that's going to be more short term. You're going to get it, you're going to get over it, you're done. Long term chronic illnesses are these things that our kids are still struggling with: tic disorders, ADHD, OCD, sensory processing, anxiety. All of these things are really these long term diagnoses. So it's really kind of, I think, heartbreaking when we think about the fact that most of our kids fit this statistic. 4 out of 10 people have 2 or more chronic illnesses. And we're going to explore really how these other mental health issues are related. I mean, we can even include autism spectrum disorders in there. If you've ever looked at the autism spectrum kind of chart where we're looking at all of these different things that are impacting these kids. So tics may be observed in children who are diagnosed with ADHD. For example, a child with tics or Tourette's is usually accompanied by attention deficits, and they are going to meet that diagnostic criteria for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Here's what you need to know. You need to know that when we are taking our child for a ADHD diagnosis, an SPD diagnosis, an OCD diagnosis, and usually a tic diagnosis, they are not testing. They are simply looking at no more extensive than a teacher observing your child. You have a doctor observing your child, maybe 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. They're asking you some questions, and then they're saying, this is what your child has. They are not looking under the hood. So you want to keep that in mind, that, the conventional approach is really not about looking at how everything functions together. Tic disorders are also comorbid with other impulse control and disruptive behaviors. We see a lot of conduct disorder, or what people call oppositional defiant disorder, and other neurodevelopmental mental issues like autism. So we know that children suffering with tic disorders usually have more than one motor or vocal tic, but they also struggle with mood swings and focus issues. Time and time again, I'm hearing this with my clients. So if your child has more than one diagnosis, I'm sure you're wondering now you're thinking, well, my kid has all of those. How are all of those things how are they all connected? And really, through various similar brain connections. So let's talk about how we are looking at the neurological pathway. So we're going to get a little sciencey today, and we're going to talk about the neurological pathway. So we have a neurological pathway that really, when we look at studies, can be responsible for these 3 conditions. And it involves the basal ganglia. I cannot speak today, guys. The basal ganglia area in your brain. Basal ganglia plays an important role in regulating behavior, cognition, emotions, as well as movement. So basal ganglia function can be disrupted when our child has a multitude of hidden stressors impacting their bodily functions. You've heard me say in previous episodes that all of the body systems are connected. And when one of those systems malfunctions, they all become imbalanced. So we have to look at what are those underlying hidden stressors that are really impacting our child's brain health. You've heard me say over and over and over again that tic disorders simply are not neurological. They are not purely neurological. What is happening with your child as far as a tic disorder goes above and beyond just a disruption in the brain. So we have to take into account all of these things are connected, and we are looking at a disruption in the immune system. So if you did not see the post this weekend, go check it out. There is a study about Tourette syndrome and related disorders in regard to immune system regulation. I have been saying this for years and years of the clients I'm working with. It is not that tics are purely neurological. There is an immune system dysregulation. So go check out that study. It is posted here on the page, but I think it's really informational for parents. But I will tell you that I feel like that study is missing a lot of information because we're not looking at what's driving that immune system dysfunction. So an immune system dysfunction can lead to tics, ADHD, and OCD with you. So ADHD, OCD, anxiety, sensory processing disorder, dysgraphia, all of these things are related to immune system imbalance. Your immune system and your neurological system are highly connected. And so when we're looking at things that are going on in the brain, we have to look at that disruption in the immune system. So Tabitha says, yes, she absolutely watched that last week. So we have to consider allergies, toxins, underlying infections, gut issues, food sensitivities. And when we are looking at this, unfortunately, tic disorders are often misdiagnosed because of the lack of understanding about what tics truly represent. Tics usually begin before that age of 18, and they may appear later in life during adulthood when we've had more than one chronic stressor impacting the body. These chronic stressors, these allergens, these toxins, underlying infections, the gut issues, the food sensitivities, the underlying genetic piece, they can lead to inflammation, leaky gut syndrome, and more. You guys have to understand that when we're looking at, yes, studies are now showing that Tourette's and related disorders like tics are driven by an immune system dysfunction. But what is driving that immune system dysfunction? You're going to hear me talk about that time and time again, because we have to look at what is going on within the immune system. So tics and OCD, you're going to hear this one probably out in your Google searches. Tics and OCD often go hand in hand when underlying infections are present, causing inflammation in the brain. So things like PANS and PANDAS are a key diagnosis when these two things suddenly appear. But we also have to consider with PANDAS, we know it's driven by strep, but with PANS, anything can really drive that autoimmune neurological inflammation. So when we're looking at PANS, it can be the foods, it can be the toxins, the allergens, the underlying gut infections. I feel like when my son was diagnosed, he probably would have been diagnosed with PANS had it been a diagnosis 10 years ago. It was not. But we know that those two, the OCD and the PANS, the PANDAS, they really kind of tics go hand in hand. But there's other underlying things that go on in the gut that can actually drive both the tics and the OCD. And if you're not testing and if you're not looking for it, then you're totally missing the boat. You're not looking at what are those underlying triggers for your child. But we know that these kids, they have multiple diagnoses, and it's always important to go back and look for those hidden stressors and inflammation. That is most likely the root of the problem. So, for example, tics and OCD are stress-related conditions. When we're talking about stress, you have to keep in mind that there are tons of other stressors. There is not just emotional stress. Emotional stress is that stress where, like, maybe your boss is a jerk or there's a bully at school. We also have to look at environmental, biological, and physical stressors when we are talking about stress. So when I'm saying tics and OCD are stress-related conditions, we know that removing those stimuli is crucial to helping your child feel at ease. But we have to figure out what that stimuli is in the first place. You have to figure out what is driving that. So we know that when we're looking at tics, Tourette's, related symptoms, there's an immune system dysfunction. You always have to ask why. This is why I do what I do, because I want to look at why do we have this immune system dysfunction in the first place. And you have to understand that there is actually a process. So many of you may say, well, we tried gluten-free and dairy-free. Or maybe we just tried gluten-free and we tried it for 2 weeks and it didn't work. You have to understand that there are many other factors involved in food above and beyond gluten-free, dairy-free. We also have to look at things like histamines. Some kids, we have to look at oxalates. But when we're looking at genetics, when we're looking at food sensitivity testing, when we're looking at organic acids, we can actually look and see what those offending allergens and sensitivities are for your child. There is no one size fits all diet. There is not one. There is not a one size fits all diet. And this is why we are looking at food sensitivity when we are looking at how do we start to reduce these stressors. We eat food all day long. If we're eating food that's not right for our body, it is going to cause stress. It is going to be a biological and an environmental stressor. So it's coming from your environment, you're eating it, but it's definitely impacting your biological systems. We have to look at that intestinal permeability. Not only that, we have to look at the microbiome balance. Oh my gosh, hold on. My dog is eating my purse. Hold on. No, sir. Okay. Sorry, everybody. I told you we might have a roomie disruption today. He was eating my purse. All right. So when we are looking at, we're looking at foods, we have to look at gut. What is happening inside your child's gut? Your gut and your brain are connected by the vagus nerve. You have some leaky gut, you have inflammation. It is going to impact your brain. Why? Because it is going to turn on the specialized immune cells in your brain called microglial cells. But so we have to look at what's driving the issues in your child's gut. I can tell you, it is not food alone. Food is a driver, it is not the driver. There are other things that are driving imbalances in your child's gut. You also have to look at underlying infections. So you guys, a lot of people think, oh, pandas, we're going to just think about, oh, it's strep. But a lot of times there's maybe not strep. Maybe there's parasites. Maybe there's Lyme disease. Maybe there's protozoas or other pathogens in the gut. I can tell you time and time again, I don't necessarily see a lot of parasites, but I do see, I've seen a lot of protozoas. I've seen a lot of pathogens. I will tell you, I've looked at hundreds of stool tests. So if you're Googling and you're thinking like pathogens, like parasites, worms, never seen a worm, not one time. But these can be the hidden causes of tics and those related symptoms. You have to look at those drivers. We have to look at the food. We have to look at the gut health. We have to look at the underlying infections or possibility of underlying infections. We have to look at removing environmental toxins and heavy metals. So many people are going to run out and look at some of these things on Google. They're going to look at these other groups and think, oh my gosh, we have to do a heavy metal detox. Stop right there. If you try to detoxify toxins and heavy metals, one, without knowing what's actually impacting your child, what's going on, and two, before your child is ready, if you have a lot of inflammation, it's most likely that there's nutritional deficiency. If there's nutritional deficiency, you are going to have a harder time detoxifying because you have to have tons of different nutrients and amino acids and antioxidants for your liver to do the 3-step process that it does to detoxify. So if you start to try to detoxify before you reduce the inflammation, before you address any kind of nutritional deficiency, you're going to be pushing a system that's not ready to be pushed. And we have to consider how many places toxins can be found. We have to test and look at what those toxins are. They can be found in so many places, including pesticides and herbicides sprayed on our foods and sprayed in our lawns. We have to look at our nonstick cookware. We have to look at the things that we are washing our clothes with and cleaning our homes with, cleaning our schools with. This is a big one right now. Really looking at all of those other things. We also have to address things like biotoxins. Your body, if your gut's a mess, can create its own toxins. Those bacteria in your gut or those pathogens in your gut can create their own toxins. Those are called biotoxins. So we have to look at that as well. What's happening in your gut? Are you creating your own toxins? If you're creating your own toxins and you don't have enough of those nutrients to detoxify, that can actually drive that stressor in your child's body. And so we have to look at those biotoxins. There's also things like mold. There's things like candida that can trigger an immune response. What we have to consider is parents want their child's tick symptoms to go away. We are a society of instant gratification. We want it to go away. We want it to be overnight. It took you a long time to get here, and I think for most parents, when you sit back and start looking at your child's progression of symptoms, it took you a long time to get here. It's going to take you a while to get out. It is not an overnight process. But when we test, when we look at all of these factors, then we can really start to apply it to our child's health. Your children's bodies need to recover from the inside out. We need to remove any obstacles for that process to happen. So we have to figure out, well, what the heck are the obstacles? Because tic disorders have that high rate of comorbidity with other diagnoses, it's more than just a neurological concern. We have to address multiple conditions simultaneously while addressing underlying causes. So just know that they are definitely connected by that immune system dysfunction. We have to look at why the immune system is dysfunctional in the first place. We have to connect all of those dots and put it all together.